Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Education Scrutiny Performance Panel. This morning, this afternoon, should I say? Sorry, my sound is strange. Apologies. There we are. Sorry, my laptop wouldn't mute. Thank you. I'm just introducing the meeting because we have the first item on the agenda is confirmation of the convener. So I'd just like to see if everyone wanted to continue with the confirmation of Councillor Lyndon Jones for convener for the coming year. Could you please indicate that that would be okay with you all? Yeah. Great. That's Lyndon Jones will be convener for the coming year. I'll hand over to him now.
Great, thank you all, and thank you for the confidence that you've shown. Thank you very much. Michelle, are there any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Sue Jones.
Are there any disclosures of any personal or prejudicial interest? Could I say that an item on the agenda is religion, values and ethics education update, and I am a member of SACRA, so I'd like to declare that. Anyone else?
I'm the same. Yeah, the same could go for me as well, Lyndon, as a member of SACRA.
Great, thank you. Anybody else for anything? No, there we are. Great, thank you. Could we have the minutes have been circulated? Are there any? Can I take them as a true record of the meeting, or? Yes, you can see that as a lot of heads nodding. So yeah, as a yes. So thank you very much for that. For information as well, you've got a copy of the letter that I sent to Councillor Robert Smith for information. Okay. Yes. Right. We're going through very quickly here. And it's then we get the public question time. There are no public questions. So we then move on to the role of the performance panel, which Michelle, I know Michelle has sent papers out to you to have a look at, but I think that is more to note than anything else. But has anybody got any comments? No, there we are. Thank you. We've all noted that, and thank you, Michelle, for sending those out. We're going through at a rate of knots here, but we've got some meaty items on the agenda. So the next item is actually number 9, and that's religion, values and ethics. And could I, in education, and could I welcome, I know the Councillor Robert Smith who's going to comment, Helen Morgan Rees, Director of Education, and welcome Jennifer Harding Richards, who is the Religion, Values and Ethics Advisor. Who wants to come in first?
If
Robert.
I could just hand over to Jennifer and thank her for the work that's gone into preparing the report. I think we've got a very good written introduction to this topic, and perhaps if Jennifer can talk us through the report, and then we can have a discussion afterwards, Chair, if that's okay.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. You're in the hot seat.
Got it. Okay, so if I can just take you through the papers that have been shared. So I'll just highlight some key points from the report, and I'll just start off with point 1.1. It's just worth putting RVE in context now with regard to the rollout of the Curriculum for Wales. So the Curriculum for Wales and legislation around RVE continues to be rolled out. Currently in schools, year 9 and below are following religion, values and ethics, and year 10 and above still continue to follow religious education. Both subjects have different legislation and different agreed syllabi, and schools, particularly our secondary schools, are very much aware of that regarding their expectations and their duties. So in introduction in legislation, I've just summarised where we are with regard to the rollout. As of September, year 10 will come on board with religion, values and ethics, and year 11 will be legacy religious education. Moving to point 2 here, so Swansea SACRA, SAC RVE, because we still have 2 committees, one to serve religious education and one to serve religion, values and ethics. We have common membership and they meet in conjunction with each other, but it's worth mentioning in point 2.1 that we have just agreed a comprehensive, very high challenge and robust development plan that very much steers the work of us as a committee and supports us in our statutory duties. This report is published, this development plan is published within our annual report as a public document, and it's available on the council website for anybody to read over, and it's a 3-year development plan. Moving to point 2.2, just to highlight here that it was agreed in our last meeting, and I think this is a really exciting initiative. All members felt that it was very important now to start sharing emerging practice and highlighting interesting and purposeful religion, values and ethics opportunities across our schools to celebrate, as well as to build confidence within the system. So our annual report that will be published at the end of this year will have several spotlights of interesting and emerging practice from across our local authority. So that's something to look out for, and a new initiative for us as a committee. Moving on to point 2.4. I think having our faith and worldview members working so proactively with us is a real strength of our committee. And we have a real commitment to support schools with their religion, values and ethics. Many of our members from the variety of faiths and worldviews and non-religious philosophical convictions have taken training delivered by RE Hubs to help them develop their role and ensure that they can support education and support schools with their understanding around RVE, and give them the opportunity to engage with people of lived experience, which is really, really valuable for, for our schools and our pupils. Moving to 3.1. The extensive professional learning offer that we have as a local authority across the system really does continue to support the development of high quality RVE. Evaluation is always carefully crafted and utilised to encourage careful and reflective practice throughout the impact of the professional learning. It's really important that myself and our committee have got an understanding of the impact of all professional learning on both the role of the professional, the teachers and the stakeholders, as well as ultimately on the learners. And so that's something that we are really building into our work, very rigorous evaluation processes. I'm just skipping through to 3.9. So we have been fortunate, again, to have some funding from West Hill Endowment, which is an organisation that seeks to promote religious education and obviously RVE within Wales. And really we've used that money to support schools to develop some flexible and adaptable resources, certainly not prescriptive in any way, to support our schools to develop consistency and have an understanding of what high quality RVE looks like. In consultation with schools, when we received that money, the 2 areas that schools and teachers felt that there was most need of continuing support was Key Stage 4, particularly around delivering core RVE, to meet their statutory duties, and also early years RVE. So the money has been used to support resources around those 2 areas. Key Stage 4 units are currently being trialled, and we're receiving really positive feedback. The resources are challenging, rigorous, and provide the opportunity for learners to really progress in their learning in core time. So in Key Stage 4, statutory RVE for 14 to 16-year-olds. And the early years resources have just been shared with feedback requested by the end of term. So we are supporting the system and listening to the needs of teachers with those resources, which, as I said, are not prescriptive, but are flexible and allow teachers to use their autonomy and subsidiarity. Moving to item 3.12, we continue to provide schools and stakeholders with a variety of guidance materials, and I've just got some listed here. And they're shared with schools regularly when the need arises. Moving forward with the role and adapting perhaps more of a strategic approach, guidance such as these being highlighted here can be included perhaps in an annex to our reviewed agreed syllabus for RVE as we start the process of reviewing that in 2026. Moving on to 3.13. We continue to work closely with our Muslim community and in fact all of our faith communities and have developed a close and mutually supportive relationship here with our 8 mosques now across Swansea, working in collaboration and supporting their work and they're working in collaboration with us as well. So I think that's a really positive partnership. Just moving to 3.15, legislative summaries for RVE and RE and daily active collective worship will be shared with schools annually each September to give them an understanding of the rollout of RVE. And in addition to that, I've written a 1-page legislative summary for schools to share with parents. The agreed syllabus is a 40-page document, and we wouldn't expect parents to necessarily look at that unless they've got a really keen interest. So we've summarised that into a 1-page document. That's now been translated into 18 languages for use with our schools, for our schools to share with their communities, particularly those who've got English as an additional language. Moving on to bullet point 4 with RVE monitoring. This is something that we've really worked on rigorously as a committee over the last year and will continue to do so, I think, in moving forward. We're adopting a triangulated approach to monitoring the external outcomes and the delivery of RVE. So the external outcomes, the data, the ESTIN reports are scrutinised annually. But in addition, we're utilising the school improvement visits, particularly our spring visits, which have a curriculum focus. And also supporting schools with empowering them to internally monitor their own provision. And I've put together a tool to support schools with that. That's currently being trialled in Alpha, and I've been invited into Alpha next Friday to work with pupils to really look at their RVE provision and use that tool to really kind of unpick what pupils feel with regard to their RVE provision. So that's something to feed back to SACRA members in September. Moving on to item 4.2 with regard to ESTIN inspections. So over the last academic year, 18 schools in Swansea were inspected. The vast majority of those schools, I'm really delighted to report, did have very positive comments around either RVE, RE, RS, daily active collective worship, or spiritual and moral cultural development. And we know that this is an area of the curriculum that tends to only get reported on if there is exceptional, so if it's not been seen or if it's been seen of high quality. So I think that really recognises the hard work that our schools across Swansea are undertaking and the commitment that they're kind of approaching RVE with, that those positive comments are being cited by ESTIN. And that's the second year running now that we've got some really, really highlighting good quality RVE provision. I just wanted to mention on that note 4.6. I think it's worth mentioning Gowerton Comprehensive School and the wonderful comment that the head of department had there around her RVE work. She was scrutinised, and she won't mind me sharing that. An hour intense interview, an hour observation, and her pupils were scrutinised around their RVE learning and the impact of the work. And it was really positive for her and positive for us as a committee and a local authority to see that hard work being recognised, not just in one sentence, but in a really chunky paragraph there. So that's recognising the great work that's happening from the head of department there. That's just one example. I've got other examples there as well. Moving to 4.10, when we are looking at the data across our local authority, it's important to recognise that national trends around RE and RVE are decreasing. So the decreasing entries for both GCSE and A-level, and it remains the subject across the whole of the curriculum that has more non-specialists delivering it than any other subject. And many schools across, certainly across Swansea and across our region, are really struggling, talking about secondary schools here, to recruit our RVE, RE specialists due to the lower ITE numbers. The National Centre for RE in Wales that has presented to us as a committee continues to highlight these issues with their research to the national bodies, Welsh Government, Qualifications Wales, and also Estyn. So we can see that our data there is showing that our numbers for both GCSE, full course and A-level are decreasing, and our short course entries are practically non-existent, with only 11 entries over the last year. And that's something that as a committee we're looking at, working with our schools and really kind of unpicking how we can support our schools to meet their mandatory statutory requirements for 14 to 16 education now that the short course is disappearing. Other things to mention very briefly. So in item 5, partnership working, I think this is a real strength of our committee, and it's a focus of our development plan to really develop partnership work with other bodies to support our work. We've had some really positive meetings with the ITE providers in UWTSD and Swansea University to look at supporting student understanding around RVE, and some real pledges to work with us, beginning to work on a variety of projects for mutual support. So some really lovely work happening there with our partner higher education institutions. Likewise, just 5.5, it's worth mentioning this because this is a really timely point. Councillor Jones, myself and our Vice Chair of our committee had a really positive meeting and discussion yesterday with the Estyn Humanities lead regarding aligning our work as a SACRA with that of Estyn. We had some really great conversation and discussion and reflection on good practice in RVE, and lots of opportunities there for us to take that further and to feed that into the work that we do with our schools. Building capacity is certainly an important part of my role. Developing a culture of collaboration and sharing, I think, is really important. Building capacity within the system to work towards equity of provision and the development of excellent RVE. And we've got some wonderful opportunities for schools to showcase and share their work across many of the professional learning opportunities that are provided. National RE, it's worth mentioning there's still a lot of work happening, and Swansea is certainly held up frequently with regard to some of the great work that we're doing. I was invited to write a blog with Professor Linda Woodhead around what is RVE. That's now been published bilingually, probably a highlight of my career, I think. And I've been invited to a curriculum symposium in King's College, London, tomorrow to talk about some of our work in our local authority as well. So it's great that the national picture around RVE is including Swansea and what we're doing here. Just moving on with regard to suggested next steps. So I've got 5 next steps there. I think it's worth mentioning 8.2. Engagement with Welsh Government for us remains a challenge. Despite a commitment to meet us termly, we haven't been able to secure a meeting with Welsh Government officers since 2024. And that's something that's very much on the agenda for our committee in our autumn meeting. 8.4, this is really important with regard to collaborative relationships, particularly around meeting 14 to 16 learner entitlement, now that short course religious studies is not being offered in the Made for Wales offer from Qualifications Wales. We know from a very tentative informal audit that not all schools are providing a rigorous RVE provision in their Key Stage 4 that allows learners to make progress in the learning, and that was something that Estyn picked up as being really important. So it's really important that we think about next steps to meet with secondary head teachers and explore what the barriers are and how we can work more closely with them. And then lastly, 8.5, really positive meeting with primary head teachers last week and subsequent meetings this week with a couple of head teachers. There's a real commitment from our primary head teachers to work with the committee and myself as an advisor around developing high quality RVE, and I've been offered the opportunity to work with ACCA and also work with a group of primary head teachers to develop our RVE daily active collective worship work. So some really exciting partnership there with our primary colleagues, and that's just taking you through the main highlights of the report.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. And an interesting report. Obviously, I see a lot of this as does Mike, because we're both members of SACRA. And I was about to say, are there any questions? I can see that Councillor Mike Day's got his hand up. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And I think the first thing I'd like to start with is the fact that we're very fortunate in Swansea to be served so well by Jennifer and colleagues in being able to push forward this particular issue, because it is one which is very kind of important. And I think what we've been recognising is that there's national challenges in connection with the delivery of this particular curriculum. So what I'm going to say is not reflective at all of what's actually going on in Swansea. It's more to do with concerns of what's going on in Wales. And I think a lot of it's been thrown into the melting pot by the introduction of the national curriculum, and remind ourselves that one of the four purposes is that we should be looking to create ethical, informed citizens of our youngsters. And the ethical element comes through quite strongly. So not only do we have, as it were, the legal framework where RVE should be delivered, but also there's that real input that RVE does provide in terms of delivering on that purpose. Unfortunately, a lot of it has been absorbed into the general humanities portfolio, and that's resulted in RE and RVE not having always the privilege of having specialist teachers to be able to deliver the subject within school settings. And I think that sort of lack of interest is shown by the reduction in numbers of exam entries. It's quite stark, isn't it, when you look at the numbers there. And just as a kind of a personal experience, my daughter did A-level RE, and I know that her skills development in terms of promoting arguments, being able to put forward cogent considerations, being able to communicate effectively, being able to understand and appreciate other people's points of views, etc., came through very much as a result of being in the A-level RE classes. I think it's a real concern, isn't it, that there's no short course available, and if there is an opportunity for us to be able to input into WJC and other exam bodies, I think that's important. One of the challenges, as Jennifer's been very kind of diplomatic, is the lack of engagement from the Welsh Government. And I think we are suffering from lack of clear advice, I think, from Welsh Government in terms of how this is to be delivered. So I suppose, in a sense, the question is, we're doing an awful lot in Swansea, and it's great to be able to see the recognition that is being put forward through various organisations and individuals, which Jennifer has referred to. And but I just wondered if there's anything further, from the cabinet members' perspective or the director's perspective, that we could be doing within Swansea, particularly in looking at one of the suggested next steps that Jennifer has put forward in terms of promoting equity in RVE provision. So I think there's that kind of challenge. But as I said, I'd like to sort of finish my questions and comments by summarising what I said at the beginning, and that is that we're extremely fortunate in having somebody like Jennifer and her colleagues in the committee to be able to push forward and promote this critically important subject. I know all subjects are important, but I think this is one of the cross-cutting themes which needs to be embedded in various ways, and we must recognise and hold up the value of RVE within the school settings. Thank you. Sorry, I've gone on a bit.
Good. Thank you, Mike. Robert.
I think there was a question there somewhere, but no, I mean, Mike, I'd endorse what the points that Mike has made, and I think that there's, I think we're on the same page here, as you know from previous discussions. I think a lot of where we'll go in terms of the next steps, Jennifer has described in terms of the work she will be doing with secondary schools, working with them to see how they can respond to the requirements on them without the short course, and I think that's going to be crucial. And I think the learning from that can be used in two ways. First of all, to embed practice here in Swansea, but I think that needs to be shared then nationally, because I think if we are to address this problem on this issue on an all Wales level, then we need to have robust practice locally, and that can be disseminated across the whole of Wales. And I think that's what I will be looking to do anyway.
Thank you, Robert. And I can see that I have James and Helen. Helen, do you want to come in first? James, if you don't mind, and then followed by you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor McGettrick. In response to Councillor Day, I would like to say how much I value RVE as an A-level student of religious education in my day as well. It does provide a fantastic springboard in terms of a values-based education, particularly. And I think given the resource constraints, both in terms of time, money and people, that we have both centrally and in schools currently, I think it's fair to say that we are punching above our weight in terms of the offer. From a local authority perspective, our provision is second to none, and our local officer, Jennifer, is the envy of the rest of Wales. We are very fortunate to have made Jennifer permanent recently as an officer, and such roles don't always exist in every local authority either. So I think within the constraints that we've got, I think we really do well, and we are very, very lucky to benefit from Jennifer's expertise. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, James.
Yeah, really enjoyed the report. Just wondered if you could expand on what the problem seems to be with communicating with the Welsh Government. It's obviously not great if we're trying to fulfil our statutory obligations and can't have a good communication pathway to make sure that we are. But I do have another question, but I thought just to understand what's going on there, really.
Gosh, I mean that's a big question, isn't it? We as a committee, we reached out to Welsh Government probably about 18 months ago to ask for meetings on a termly basis, and Welsh Government committed to that. And I think we did have two meetings. One which was the last one, which was October of 2024, and the previous one was the term before that. And despite several kind of communications from our clerk, from our committee's clerk, we haven't been able to secure a further meeting. I think part of the reason is there's change in personnel. So my understanding, but this is totally anecdotally, my understanding is that there's been change in personnel with regard to humanities and the RVE team. or lead within Welsh Government. But that said, our communication is going to somebody and it's being read, because we always require read receipts. So following our Swansea SACRA meeting last week, our clerk has sent another communication to Welsh Government yesterday, just reminding them that they committed to meeting us termly. So we are going to wait to see if we get any communication back by the end of perhaps next week, and then consider next steps after that.
Okay, James. And
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I would just ask the committee to note that's something we should maybe keep an eye on, because that's not great for our local team, is it? So could we revisit just to make sure that is actually freeing up in the future?
Sorry, did you have a second question, James?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's an unrelated question. It's more about the decline in numbers and looking at the numbers. I mean, it's really good to see point 8.3 has come in here about the promotion of the equity, because it's very clear that there seems to be very different numbers from different schools. Is there a feeling about why some schools are able to offer it really well and some aren't? What are the big barriers that are blocking all of the schools from giving that offering?
I think it would probably be unfair of me to say at the moment, because I'm very kind of early on with regard to analysing the numbers and analysing the barriers. So I think some schools have a higher number of specialist teachers, and so if there are more specialist teachers, then clearly there's more opportunities for schools to have a wider offer around RS, RVE. Some schools may only just have one person within the department, and so that one person would be expected then to teach the whole of year 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11, so there are always going to be difficulties there. But I think it's probably a little bit too early, and it would be unfair of me to say what the barriers are, because I'd like to have that conversation with senior leaders, I think, in the secondary schools, to find out what those barriers are and how we can work with them as a standing committee. I think we do an awful lot. I think there's a lot of professional learning, a lot of support. And we're working with UWTSD at the moment to look at some possibility of accrediting a course that we've got. But I think, giving schools the opportunity, I suppose, to have open and honest conversations around what the barriers are would be important before I certainly jump to conclusions.
I completely understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got three hands up. David, Helen, and then Sandra.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just check you can still hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So just in answer to Mike's question, really, and Jennifer's absolutely right. It would perhaps be too early to answer that with, in its entirety. However, what I can say is now Jennifer's permanent in the teams, no longer a secondee from school, enables us to really integrate Jennifer's work into the curriculum team more seamlessly, and therefore the gathering of intelligence and exposure to senior leaders, as she described, is something that's going to be a priority for us in the coming education year. So from our perspective, it's going to be something that Jennifer's going to focus on from September in a more integrated way with other officers and through the networks which have been established via SCASE and the Senior Leadership Network. So, hopefully we'll be able to share a bit more, James and Mike, in the future when we've got a bit more information to understand the barriers. So I hope that's useful.
Great, thank you, David. Helen.
Yes, just to supplement that answer in terms of the second question from Councillor McGettrick, the likely scenario is it's about choices within the envelopes provided to schools. So historically, there may have been subject expertise, humanities probably being bundled together, potentially a faculty model in the school would then create a choice, really, in competition around the specialists and non-specialists. But as Di said, we just need more time really to focus on specifically what those matters would be. But I suspect it is probably down to choice and money.
Great, thank you, Helen. Sandra.
First of all, thank you for such a comprehensive report. It's really, really helpful. I just wanted to ask you if you could expand at all on 8.4, where you've said continue to build strong collaborative relationships with senior leaders. Where are you on that continuum? What does it look like at the moment? And have you any concrete plans as to where it's going to go next? Yes.
Sorry, we can't hear anything.
And that's why. Sorry. I've presented to SCASH last year. Haven't been invited to present to them this year. So I think we're very much in early days with regard to that partnership. I do meet secondary leads termly. So I have network meetings with our secondary RVE, RS leads on a termly basis. And they are very open and very transparent about some of the decisions that are made in school, often which are made with their hands being tied. So I think it's, I think we're really at the beginning of the relationship with senior leaders in secondary schools, but already have relationships and partnerships with our secondary leads for RE.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other thing is, I think that is important that came out of that is sharing good practice, because certainly on the SACRA committee, I think Mike will bear me out that we've seen some real good examples of things, and I think that sharing of that practice, that good practice, is really important, and we should sing about that. Yes, there are issues, and I think around training, which is not a Swansea issue, it's a Wales issue, as we found out in the Bangor report. But certainly sharing good practice is really important, and what that actually looks like, because that could help drive numbers up as well of people taking exams. So I'd like, obviously for us to consider that. And are there any other?
Well, I'd endorse that, but what I would say, of course, is that that purpose in the curriculum applies to every learner across the board. It's not just those. We don't want to confine anything to children that are choosing certain subjects here. There's to be a universal as well as a subject provision, and I think that's something we need to be looking at and are looking at as well.
Thank you. No, totally agree. Are there any other points? If not, can I thank Jennifer? She's doing a cracking job on behalf of us all. So thank you very much indeed. And, keep up the good work and enjoy tomorrow. Even if it might be a little hot in London.
You've got a return ticket to London, have you?
Yes, I have. I am coming back.
Good.
Right. The next item on the agenda is the Curriculum for Wales update. And I've got Robert, Helen and David. I don't know who's going to come in first.
Well, again, I'll hand over to Di, I think, because he led on the report. Excellent. I feel an excellent quality summary being presented to the committee chair. And if Di takes us through the report, and again, happy to take questions at the end.
David, down to you.
Thanks, councillors. So follow that. Well done. Thanks, Jen. So what I'm going to do, given this is an annual, an update report, essentially, and you'll have time to digest it, I've done a little summary of the key points. I'm not intended to take us through the report, but and certainly willing to take any questions at the end. So in terms of progress, obviously Curriculum for Wales has been mandated by Welsh Government since the Act in 2021 and is still being phased in when it will conclude that phased in by 2026. And of course, that will include the revision of specifications for GCSEs. And so some highlights from my perspective. So many primary and secondary schools have made strong progress and they have a clear vision for their curriculum development for what their curriculum looks like, and they have a collaborative practice in place. And what I mean by that is they've worked alongside other partners, school-based colleagues and their stakeholders to develop an effective, authentic curriculum. The school improvement team and the inclusion of a curriculum learning and teaching team, we provide targeted support for schools just to enhance the delivery of their curriculum, but also their planning for transition and ongoing curriculum design and review. And I'm pleased to say that we're continuing to support that team's work through their spend plans and priorities through the Local Authority Education Grant. Since our collaboration model that we've submitted to Welsh Government, school-to-school collaboration continues to grow and is a strength of our city. Not just schools working together on common priorities, but schools working outside of the local authority and working with the local authority in partnership. So, for example, we've got something called Llwybr Dysgu, which you'll have seen reference in the report, which aims to gather intelligence of effective practice models and works with schools to continue to evaluate the impact of, for example, improved practices for teaching and learning, strategies that teachers use to make the deal better for children and young people. So that's an ongoing project, and that continues to grow in Swansea, which again has always been a strength of ours. You'll notice from the report that collaboration has received 90 hits in terms of our schools. So we've got to nearly all of our schools and settings in the last year in some sort of collaboration or another. And then our engagement in the national and regional networks is very strong in Swansea. We've got hugely influential people who attend the National Literacy Numeracy Framework networks, and also our pedagogy specialist, Katrina Peters, who is leading on our work in terms of enabling learning guidance, which is likely to take a front seat role in the development of pedagogical approaches in the coming year, from my view. So we continue to be represented both at a national and a regional and, of course, local level, which influences our strategy in terms of the curriculum learning and teaching team. And then as a result of that, we're able to upskill and further upskill our teaching workforce. Some of the strategic actions that we've taken outlined in the report. So the school improvement team, both the curriculum side of it and school improvement advisors, continue to evaluate the impact of curriculum planning. And how we do that is through the lens of pupil progress. So what can children do better or more better or differently as a result of that curriculum offer? And that's continuing to be a focus for us into the coming academic year. And professional learning has been enhanced over the last 18 months. The prioritisation given to us by Welsh Government in terms of the national priorities, be it literacy and numeracy certainly, have instigated more integrated approaches. So, for example, we talk about the improvements in teaching and learning. Our programme Teach for Purpose is an integrated approach. So it's not just about raising the bar in terms of teaching and learning, generally speaking, but can be applied through literacy, numeracy, digital competence, and that sort of thing. So that's a really key piece of work in terms of our continued focus for professional learning for our workforce. Schools make use of the National Resource for Evaluation and Improvement, the NREI, and emerging from that is a toolkit that is mirrored by governing bodies. So that's being used to support deeper and better self-evaluation in terms of our curriculum offer, and also the difference that teachers make in terms of their curriculum. And then there is a strong emphasis placed on inclusive curriculum design. And what I mean by that is schools in Swansea, there's a real strength in their authentic offer. Their work looks to provide opportunities for pupils, authentic opportunities to immerse themselves in the world around their school. And many schools consider the international, the national and the local opportunities for pupils to explore in themes, and I've mentioned this previously, for things like sustainability. That would look very different for a school in the east of Swansea and north than it might do for a school that finds itself in Swansea West. And then just a couple of areas for development from my perspective in the report. So there are a few schools that remain in the early stages of Curriculum for Wales implementation, and they need continued and targeted support. And we do that through the school improvement team via the school improvement advisor and our officers. And there is a need to continue to strengthen the pedagogical approaches so that we've got a consistent and cohesive approach to identifying what we need to do more with pupils, so pupil progress being front and centre. And to that end, we need to embed the principles to promote learning that we shared previously, as you'll be aware, because that provides a consistent framework for that focus on pupil progress. And it's been shared at both primary and secondary head teacher meetings very recently, and did receive a number of congratulatory comments. It was well received in terms of its commonality and its use of common language to support practitioners back at school. And then there are some occasions where secondary schools might have missed some opportunities to further develop cross-curricular links. So the integration and cross-AOLE links, for example, it could help to support transition planning. And that, I suppose, what's really shone a light on that is the new GCSE specifications. So the integration of cross-curricular skills in a secondary curriculum is something that continues to be a focus for some of our schools. And then, before I conclude, two challenges really from our perspective. We've got vulnerable learners is still something that we find and schools find quite difficult to tackle and manage. And there are, an increasing number of referrals made to the Vulnerable Learner Service. But schools are operating and planning to deliver more vocational qualifications for pupils, but find themselves having to deliver more trauma-informed practices and approaches, which enables pupils to be ready to learn. But of course, given the emergence from pause is in learning and social context, that makes it difficult for schools to deliver as we would describe through a curriculum. So there's a really sharp focus on how we manage and support vulnerable learners. And topically, there's still parental concerns for things like RSE and RVE. And in some schools, curriculum changes because we're unable to report, as you know, on statistical data. End of key stage data doesn't exist any longer, with the exception of the end of key stage 4 GCSE. So sometimes parents do find it quite difficult, and staff, in order to report against a benchmark because there isn't one. So we're grappling with that at the school level and at a local authority level. So obviously I'll be open to questions. But in conclusion, the focus of this piece of work in schools and settings in Swansea is going to be how we support schools to evaluate the effectiveness of their curriculum. And we're going to do that through the lens of strengthening leadership, obviously through that collaboration approach. But as I'll try and say again, what difference does it make to children and young people? What can they do more, better, differently as a result? And that is couched under the brackets of pupil progress. What difference does that curriculum make to the progress that our children and young people in Swansea make? So open to any questions or comments.
Great, thank you, David, for that comprehensive report. Before we go into any questions, can I say to Jennifer, if you'd like to leave, you're very welcome to stay to the end of the meeting, but feel free to go anytime you want. But so you can escape, in other words. But thank you. Right, are there any questions? I've got a few, but I'm sure you'll all have questions. Have we got any questions? And while people are considering that, could I say, David, you mentioned a few schools are at early stages in curriculum design. How are we in that position, really, at this stage?
Yeah, good question. There'd be any number of reasons for that, Chair. One of them will be senior leadership changes. and they haven't been able to embed their practice. And, you know, the turnover is reasonably high for a city like Swansea, 94 schools and settings. And if you look at the list, there's a number of new and acting head teachers in post. So that's one reason. Another one is contextual changes, contextual differences in their schools and settings. So the ability to pivot and to plan curriculum is tricky. And some schools, to be fair, have evaluated the effectiveness of the curriculum and are not starting again, but are revisiting their approaches to it. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is because not all of our schools have been as effective as we'd like them to be in developing a shared understanding of progression. So I'm not suggesting that they haven't designed a curriculum and that there isn't content. What I'm saying is that where we want it to be and where it is most effective is where that shared understanding of progression is established. And that doesn't just talk about pupils in their school. I'm talking about across the 3 to 16 continuum. But that's not an uncommon priority for schools in Wales, Chair.
Thank you, David. Mike.
I think it's great actually that we've got this opportunity for an examination of the self-evaluation processes, but also some external evaluation, because let's not forget this has been a major change in the way in which education is being delivered in Wales, and I think we have to applaud the teachers for the work that they've been doing in terms of starting from scratch almost, and I think Di's really put his finger on some of the key issues. I suppose the challenge, which I think was referred to previously, is the ability to raise the standards, as one, rather than us having sort of people who are racing ahead and those who are falling behind. So just wanted to find out, Di, what are the mechanisms for sharing good practice? Obviously, you and your colleagues are going to play a significant role in that, but what are the other mechanisms that are available for us to see all teachers, all schools, moving along at the same rate of progress?
Yeah, so two things there, Mike, potentially is how do we share effective practice and how do we evaluate the progress towards this reform agenda, and the former being the sharing of effective practice. So we've got 3 opportunities for primary and secondary heads in the calendar year, which are facilitated by the local authority. So we try and make every opportunity to share effective practice at least once during those meetings. So there's an example. We're supportive of a collaborative approach to school improvement. So we encourage those collaborative partnerships between schools within their clusters as a starting point. And an example of how the school improvement team share effective practice is the facilitation of something called llwybr dysgu. So the shared learning approach, where we identify a school that's picked up a project, for example, one of those is Teach for Purpose, have identified that they need to do more work and have taken themselves through a journey, and then I've noticed that actually it's having a great impact in the quality of teaching and then therefore learning. And then we as officers case study and showcase that. So there are a number of examples for those, one of them being Pontlw Primary School that has showcased. Another one would be Bishop Gore in terms of its shared understanding of progression for its cluster model. So those are the sorts of ways in which we're hoping to share that effective practice. And it is a key feature now, Mike, in the spend plans for the curriculum learning and teaching team next year. It's part in their job descriptions to be able to identify schools. And we have a roundtable conversation, calling it a school improvement conference, but it's called other things in the past, where we look at all schools, all 94 schools and settings in the city, and try and identify where teaching and learning is best. We see it best, and we can then share those. There are other examples as well. For example, the SCASE network, that's used particularly well for discussion and dialogue around what's effective, and then they share amongst themselves. But of course, there's the regional and local organised networks that's organised into AOLEs and subject networks as they are traditionally. So, there's a fair amount, and that platform to share is front and centre in our work. And in terms of the evaluation of progress towards this reform agenda, how do we do that? Well, we visit every school at least twice a year. In primaries, it's more. And going forwards, the school improvement team is going to be made up of nearly all officers, with some secondee head teachers in there. And a part of that focus for every single school and setting is the quality and or impact of its curriculum. So in terms of how we measure that consistently, well, the agenda that I set for the school improvement advisors is consistent for every school and setting. So there's always that balance and check against each school's curriculum. So that's the way in which we are considering the evaluation of impact towards that reform agenda. But it's not straightforward and simple, because some schools require the support in different areas, so we don't necessarily get under the skin of all of those schools and settings as sort of in an invasive way as we might. And don't get me wrong, whilst it's not the way, but one way is obviously an analysis of national and local outcomes from other verified organisations such as the Inspectorate. We haven't got a huge number of curriculum based recommendations across it's not a massive issue for us in Wales, and in fact it's a key strength in the annual report. So those are the things that we tend to do, Mike, and happy to answer any further questions on that if required.
That's really helpful. If I may, Lyndon, perhaps I could follow up with another question which I might not be able to answer, and maybe the others could throw in. But is there any evidence or suggestion to say that this curriculum, this change, and the additional workload placed upon our teaching colleagues, either locally or nationally, is having an impact in terms of teacher recruitment and or people leaving the profession earlier than perhaps they would otherwise have done?
I'll hand to Helen, because she's certainly got a finger on the pulse on this one.
Thanks, Diane. Thank you, Councillor Day. So not necessarily in and of itself in terms of curriculum on its own, adding to the workload and the worry about retaining teachers or indeed recruiting teachers into the profession. But I think it's the sum of all parts, isn't it? It's the combined kind of workload issues coming from various corners, not just curriculum. I think curriculum is the thing that teachers would be most passionate about. And then there are things that they are less passionate about, which are very wearing and troubling for them over the course of their young career very often. And we are seeing nationally teachers leave the profession. The evidence base, some of it is sound, and then in other statistical analyses, the evidence base is a little bit worrying in terms of how the numbers were gathered and crunched to begin with. But what we see locally in Swansea is a good retention levels. We're not seeing a drift from the profession in Swansea, which is pleasing to us locally, but we are very mindful both of head teacher workload and practitioner workload in Swansea, and any new initiatives or developments that we introduce from a local authority perspective, we try and triage them. We try and understand really what the impact on the workload might be. And we've been quite innovative in Swansea to blaze on that agenda to ensure that obviously there's a workforce plan nationally, and this is being looked at nationally, but we are trying to take local steps that meet local needs, and I think we're doing it quite well at the moment.
Great, thank you, Helen. Mike, do you want to come back at all, or?
No, that's fine. It may be something that we might wish to look at as a scrutiny committee at some point in terms of teacher retention, recruitment, etc.
Great, thank you. One point on that, which I've asked before on this subject, as you know, are we taking teachers with us on this journey? Because that is so important for that teacher retention. And I can see Robert wants to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair, because I mean, how can I put this diplomatically? I think when Curriculum for Wales was being promoted, those aspects, the freedom to create your own curriculum, to meet the needs of the children within, the learners within your own class, all of that, those positive aspects were sold very, very well. And I think that has enthused teachers, and I think teachers have responded well, as Di has described, to those opportunities. What I think we need to look at as well are those issues around progression, the moving from a system where you had a lot of assessment data to a system where you've got very little assessment data, and the implications that has for teaching and learning, the implication that has for teacher workload and so on. I think those are issues that were very clear to a lot of us, and I would pay tribute to the work that Di and his team have done in recognising that issue and trying to grapple with it. And I think some of the reports that we've had done for the STF, for instance, have been an important step forward. So I think there's work going on here in Swansea. I can't speak about other authorities, but I think is trying to balance that those issues that need to be addressed, as well as the positives coming out of this new curriculum. And I think, let's be honest about things. Yes, there are problems as well as benefits, and let's grapple with them and move forward. And I think our team is doing its best, as indeed I said in relation to the work that Jennifer is doing. So I think, I pay tribute to the team we've got for undertaking those tasks, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert. Any other questions? No. Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, David, for that pretty comprehensive report, I have to say. So thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is obviously the key issues in education and planning the work programme for the remainder of the year. And could I invite Helen to talk about some of the issues as she sees them? Helen.
Thanks, Chair. I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation that appears in the bundle of papers for this panel this afternoon. Would it be okay if I shared my screen?
Certainly, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll make an attempt to get the right thing on the screen. Hopefully that's working for everybody. Can somebody just give me a yes?
It is.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, if we start at the beginning. Okay, so for the purposes of this afternoon, I've identified 10 key current matters or issues affecting education. And this is not just my isolated opinion. This has been gathered in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Education and Learning, but also the heads of service across the whole of the Education Directorate. So this is a combined thought process. So those are the 10 key items. If I canter through them and draw attention to the main points, starting with right schools, right places, and that should be a plural, not a singular school, because we have obviously a number of schools to contend with. So the key points in this issue is that we obviously have a programme for new buildings and remodeled schools, but we do have to look at the longer term in terms of the school estate and keep a watchful eye on what might happen in the next 10 to 15 to even 25 years. So that is something that we have started to address through the STC, the Service Transformation Committee, with our strategic provision plan for schools, and that will be something that needs further refinement before we take it out for stakeholder consultation. We are duty bound to consider the provision of Welsh medium as part of our Welsh in Education strategic plan. So the positioning of opportunities for potentially new builds or remodelled provisions that could house further Welsh medium provision across key areas across the city, something that we are required to do by Welsh Government, and there is a huge priority in terms of capital funding there as well. We also have capital funding in relation to community focused schools, and those environments are really, really important, especially if we are to co-locate services that support our children. I'll go through onto the further slides and take questions at the end, if that's okay, Chair.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the second consideration and key issue for us has been an issue for a while and will continue to be an issue in education, no doubt. And I spoke in my first slide about better learning environments. We do also receive additional learning needs, capital funding to create better learning environments within ALN, within our special schools, our specialist teaching facilities, and indeed mainstream classrooms have benefited from that capital grant for additional learning needs. But I think across the board for ALN, the issues that we are mostly grappling with are the greater age range that we are required to provide for. So we have to consider 0 to 3 as early years in terms of entry into compulsory education, and also the post-16 in terms of what happens to children who have an identified ALN once they leave compulsory education. In terms of the higher ambition there, what we are trying to support is the strategic aim of ALN reform in terms of ensuring that we best meet our children in Swansea's needs locally, and potentially we support capacity building in our mainstream schools to keep children within mainstream. So there's a balance to be struck. While we are still grappling with sufficient specialist places and creating special environments for these children to attend, we are duty bound as well to upskill the workforce in mainstream schools and ensure that we have enough staffing as well to support keeping children in mainstream where possible. So turning to our next key issue, which is strengthening school improvement. This is a new feature for us. We've had a long track record of strong school improvement activity. With the recent changes to the ESTIM framework, we have seen, for example, in this academic year, 2 of our secondary schools go into a statutory category from an ESTIM perspective. So as soon as that happened, we commissioned a peer review to ensure that we had some external eyes on what we were currently doing and asking those peer reviewers to help us with recommendations on how we could improve our service and move forward. So that activity has happened. So that's required us to work with our stakeholders, to work with our schools, particularly our school leaders, to ensure that we've reset some of the expectations. We've also been able to add capacity to our secondary school improvement team particularly, and we've also been able to work with our stakeholders in terms of what matters the most, in terms of the key areas of focus that we should be looking. And those panelists who have been here long enough to remember that we've come out of a categorisation era where between 2014 and 2018 there was heavy accountability in terms of the public publishing really of the category in terms of the traffic light system, as some people called it, back in those days. We've moved away from that, but we do still need to have an eye on the level of support required in all our schools in Swansea. So that is the point of our school improvement team, to support proportionally commensurate really with the level of need in schools. And as Di said earlier, schools context and leadership can change often overnight, so that we need to understand really what's happening so that we can best support our schools. But in order for us to undertake any changes from the current ways of working in school improvement, we obviously have to communicate any changes carefully and effectively and bring them with us in terms of that improvement journey to improve our team and our offer for school improvement. Our next consideration is how we embed our inclusion strategy. So our inclusion strategy was taken through the service transformation committee a while ago, and there's been a real recent focus on the behaviour support that we are affording to our schools. And we are pleased to say that the local authority behaviour policy has been completed, and we are about to issue the final version that we've actually completed this week of the school's model policy for behaviour, which really pays testament to the level of local authority support that we are giving. But it's not the end of the journey, it's a start of a journey really, and we need to embed all of the things there that we are doing. We are improving attendance slowly. We are promoting the need to be as inclusive as possible in our schools. We have taken further steps to strengthen our provision, particularly in terms of school counselling, where it comes to emotional health and well-being. And we are still working really to ensure that all our children, no matter how diverse their learning needs are supported as much as possible in the mainstream, as I said earlier. Turning to our fifth key issue is, where do children go after they leave us? It is a matter of concern. We have a target around NEETs, children not in education, employment or training. It's been at 2% or keeping it lower than 2% for a number of years. We've risen above that, so we are not meeting our target currently in terms of NEET. So we need to do something different and something a little bit more innovative potentially to support the designing destination strategy. So we are working very closely with employers locally. We are about to not soft launch, I would say properly launch our Swansea Pledge. This is a new initiative where we've worked carefully to ask local employers, both of a global nature and smaller businesses, to sign the new Swansea Pledge to promise to work with us over the course of the next 3 years to work meaningfully and purposefully with all our schools across Swansea. Now, you may say, well, that happens anyway. It does in some areas, but it's that parity and equity. We need to do more for certain schools, and we need to get a consistent approach so that every learner within the next 5 years has had a really good opportunity to engage with employers, not just through Careers Wales, who work well in our secondary schools, but even at a younger age in our primary schools as well, to inspire and raise the hopes and ambition for our learners here in Swansea. So turning to the next area, which is something that has emerged post-COVID, post-pandemic, and we've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence and supporting evidence from our schools to suggest that reading is not where it should be. Now, interestingly, this has been picked up by the current Service Transformation Committee, so they will be looking at this as a key piece of work during the municipal year 25-26, and they will be supported really by officers in terms of current thinking and more developmental thinking to improve this area in terms of how we can support not just our schools but also parents and carers with the need to emphasise reading skills as the way to unlock the curriculum. In terms of our seventh priority there and key issue is mathematics. If those of you who read Estin thematic reviews, you may have come across it in the last month in terms of the provision for mathematics. The Service Transformation Committee has also picked up this topic under the banner of numeracy, and they will be looking at this topic as well during the course of this municipal year. So we obviously have a local offer. Di described some of it in terms of curriculum support, but in terms of specific support for subjects, we get a lot of the secondary support from our region, from Partneriaeth, who we still commission to deliver the parts of curriculum support and teaching and learning support that we can't deliver locally. So that will be looked at this year. Obviously, the quality of teaching is something that's been picked up by Estin in a few of our inspection reports. We've got some really excellent teaching and learning happening in many of our schools, but I think this is our core business. This is what education is all about, and getting the quality of that teaching and learning to be the best it can be is something that we all aspire to and really want to promote and prioritise always. So that will remain a key issue perennially, no doubt. Our ninth one is our strategic Welsh in Education plan. And obviously we're in our third year. It hasn't been brought to the scrutiny table discreetly yet as a discrete topic for consideration. It is a 10-year strategy, so there is a potential for scrutiny to examine our progress and traction against this strategic plan. I'm not saying that you need to. There are some updates we've provided in our annual report. December time, I bring my directors annual update on the progress we've made against objectives and some of our recommendations that were given to us in 2022 by Estyn. But this is a broad piece of work and probably requires scrutiny, I would suggest. And finally then, in terms of key areas that affect education, obviously we've just heard from Di about the curriculum. So I'll stop sharing now and ask if there are any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Helen, for that report, and it was really interesting to see. I'll take questions from the floor, but a few of those jumped out at me, and one of them is strengthening the school, our school improvement around teaching. The other one that really jumped out was designing destinations and careers and what people do after they leave school, and I think that really jumped out. And one thing we actually already written in was for ourselves to look at the support for reading. But over to the panel. Any questions, please? Or any questions or thoughts? Mike.
Yes, sorry. Just a quick question, Helen. On in our bundle of papers on pages 12 and 13, we've got there about targets, as it were, as by the end of 2024-25 we will have, and then there's a number of bullet points and how we will measure progress. I'm just sort of checking that from your point of view, what you've just presented to us would cover all of those elements in terms of the things that would be seeking or being sought to be achieved. So it's just really kind of triangulating really with the issues that were raised previously, and to ensure that, you know, when we do come to identify our work program, that looking at the PowerPoint that you provided, that we'll be covering all of those elements on pages 12 and 13.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to just toggle to go to page 12 and 13 in my bundle, just to cross-reference what you've just said. Yes, it would.
Bottom of page 12, top of page 13.
Yes, yeah. It would, Mike. I think the thing to be conscious about is potential duplication between this panel and the Service Transformation Committee, and I've tried to guide this panel as to what that particular committee is going to be looking at this year as well. They're also picking up catering in schools in the Service Transformation Committee, and I know there's been obviously an interest around food in schools in this panel previously, and potentially the cooking skills really has been of interest to panelists here. But just to alert you that we're looking at you know, what the catering service provides in that Service Transformation Committee, just for you to know.
Thank you, Helen. And next is Beth, followed by James, and then Fiona. Beth.
Thanks. I'm just reflecting on, we had a governance meeting yesterday where they presented about the stats with reading and English. And I was sort of questioning why they were sort of seeing those stats drop. Is it, you know, is it a COVID thing? and they were talking about mobile phones in particular, and I just wondered if there was any review, if that's something that your officers are looking at, or maybe it's something we could do as a short-term thing, as a sort of a sharing of practice across maybe the head teachers around what they're doing with policies around, it's kind of, it filters through everything. I think it's, it's mental health, it's reading, it's distraction in schools, it's bullying, it's all sorts of things connected with phones. But I just wondered if that was something that's kind of on the radar, because it obviously comes up quite a lot in schools, and they're coming up with policies around trying to reduce pupils using them in schools and things like that. But I just wondered if there was something here. Obviously it's a national thing. I know that we're seeing it across the board, but just a thought.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say thank you, Beth, and there we go. Over to Helen.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a good question. It's probably potentially a good question for this panel to be considering. We don't have a particular policy as a local authority around mobile phone usage in school. That's probably left to each school and their governing body to decide what that could look like. So we haven't developed anything for you to scrutinise from our perspective. That said, we have promised to undertake, as a result of our work on behaviour and the draft local authority policy for behaviour, and indeed the model policy for schools, further work in this area. So maybe it could be a future topic, but maybe at this point in time we don't have enough information that we've already undertaken for you to scrutinise.
Great, thank you, James.
Yeah, Helen's just answered part of my question, which was again around the literacy and numeracy. It's sad times, isn't it? But I was also going to ask about your comment that it's probably a good idea to bring sort of the Welsh in education to scrutiny. Is there anything that's, other than we're a few years in, is there anything that's sort of particularly driving your thoughts there? And one thing I do remember seeing when the numbers were brought by the cabinet member to the council was the provision seems really good. The use of Welsh is going up, but it seems stubbornly low with the very young kids. And is that something that worries you? I noticed you've got more nursery children, you've got more reception children down on the list. So is that an area that's particularly worrying you?
It is, in terms of our targets for reception and year one. You're right to point out those statistics. We've not met our targets, and it's incumbent upon us to create the demand for Welsh. It's not about measuring the demand anymore in Swansea. We are required by legislation to create more places, create more interest, and to promote and market Welsh medium education as part of the national drive to 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. Obviously, there are changes to legislation. Some of them are about to reach royal assent in terms of the bill for education and Welsh particularly. So it's probably a good time for that to be scrutinised in order to inform our next stages and maybe suggest further work that we could do. So it could provide us with an impetus to improve on what we're doing already. So that's driving my thinking.
Yeah, thank you for that and the suggestion.
Thank you very much. Fiona.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I was just wondering if you could just say a little bit more about ALN. So now transformation is almost complete. How will we ensure that ALP will be kept under review, in schools? Will that be through school improvement or through the ALN team? But I'll ask another question after that, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So provision in terms of ALN, IDPs, that kind of thing, through our ALN team for sure. So that monitoring, we do have a quality assurance arm of our ALN team. In terms of the monitoring of our SDFs, which is something we're currently working on, we are about to launch a memorandum of understanding with our SDFs, which is an enhancement to what we've had in the past. We haven't had that. And part of that MOU will consider how we drive forward quality across our specialist places to ensure that we've got a consistent high expectation bar really in terms of that provision. And we are working in an integrated way with School Improvement, broadening their knowledge of all things ALN as well. We're building their capacity to help us monitor. But part of the MOU will be a 3-year rolling programme of quality assurance for our specialist teaching facility. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. And if I'm right to ask one more, so what is the demand for Welsh ALP at the moment, and are we meeting it, or are we sort of working towards meeting that? You know, because parents can request that provision is made in Welsh. You know, how much demand is there for that?
Yeah, so currently we have developed new provision to meet some of the demand. It is pretty low in terms of demand, but obviously historically we haven't had as many specialist places. So as people come to know about it, obviously that they are probably going to think, well, I can send my child to somewhere locally that I didn't have before. We want to extend it across the two clusters for Bryn Tower and Goir, and currently we've extended primary provision in the Goir cluster, and we are seeking to do it more for our second secondary Welsh medium school from a Bryn Tower perspective. But obviously the geographical positioning is key because both schools attract from a very broad catchment area, don't they? So we are trying to pinpoint the best place for that. But I'd say, to answer your question, it's quite low at the moment, but it's probably through lack of visibility and understanding that provision is being expanded. And of course, with duty bound, it's one of the key objectives within our WESP, or Welsh in Education Strategic Plan.
Thank you. Can I ask one more? Okay. So I was just wondering about the post-16 landscape, you know, in terms of ALN, and are you seeing an increasing demand, and you know, which brings, you know, increasing financial pressures, and is, you know, how are you responding to that?
Yes, it's fair to say the demand is there in both kind of ends of the spectrum. So from an early years perspective, demand is increasing, and post-16 the same, particularly with neurodiversity. We're having to work very closely with our providers post-16 to ensure that there's that continuity. So definitely we're seeing both ends of the spectrum with high demand.
Thank you.
Great, fine, thank you. Angela, you've got your hand up.
Hiya, thank you. I understand that there's obviously a driving force for the Welsh language and to increase numbers of the people speaking the Welsh language. But is there a slight concern that there's too much time or energy being focused on that when maybe the students' basic reading skills need to be improved? Are you thinking along that lines, or is there any concern with that?
I think from our primary school perspective, when you look at children who attend Welsh medium, very often they don't come from an English speaking background. They are from, they do come from an English speaking background and attend our Welsh medium schools. And obviously the early acquisition of language, you know, the earlier you learn two languages and become bilingual, the better. So I think some of the reading issues would have existed anyway, with whether they were monolingual or bilingual. And obviously then we've got to consider developmental issues, additional learning needs. But I think once a child is in school and they're given a really good reading programme, they can acquire, you know, the skills, the reading skills very quickly. Obviously in Welsh medium, Welsh is taught phonetically. And it's
different there, because I suppose, sorry, if they've gone to not a Welsh medium school because they haven't chosen that, they've gone to an English medium school where obviously they're still learning Welsh.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they've got reading skills in English, they may need to, you know, polish up on those and prioritize those. So I think, you know, an individualized learning program for any child is in you know, is the right way to go. So children would have to consider really, or teachers would have to consider what's best for the children in front of them. And if there is a delay in picking up any reading skills in a particular language, then learning a second language would be, you know, proportionate. They wouldn't push those children to develop bilingualism too early. It would maybe slow the process down of acquiring another language, but the priority would be to ensure that those basic skills were there in the first language first.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Great, fine, thanks. Could I pass over to Michelle, who's going to pick up a few things that we talked about at the when we had the scrutiny conference.
Hello, yes. At the Scrutiny Work Planning Conference, a number of issues were raised, and I'll just feed those through. The relevant corporate, one of the issues that wanted to be included in all panels is the relevant corporate transformation programme and projects. Well, for education, it will be right schools, right places. An ALN sufficient places transformation plan. Both of these things are already scheduled within your work programme suggestions here. The other issues that were raised included education other than school, and that in relation to CAMS, and ALN and neurodiversity access. So we do have all of these already planned in, already suggested within the list that you have.
Fine, thank you, Michelle. And there's a couple of other things, and that is when I look at my notes here, we're looking at a cluster visit in January, and which cluster do we actually visit to talk about the curriculum? So we need to have a look at that, and obviously take advice from Helen and the team about that. So let's have a look. Yeah, what cluster do you want to speak to in January? Yeah, that is obviously something. So Helen, really like your input on that. And a number of things have come up from Helen's presentation. Also, there are items in the draft programme. Can I suggest we put something together and send it round to everyone so you to have a look at, and then we can, you know, make any changes we might need to, but we'll put that draft plan together. Is that acceptable? Yeah, saying agreement there.
Yeah,
great.
great.
We'll do that. Obviously, there's a draft that's been sent around, but we've picked up a lot of things today from Helen's presentation, points that Michelle made, and the points that you all made as well. So we'll try and incorporate all that into it and send it round for you to all have a look at. And if that is okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Well, other than that, that's the end of the agenda. So could I really thank you all for your attendance and your input in the meeting as well. And I think we've had some really interesting presentations today. We've really kicked the year off really well. So thank you very much, and have a safe journey home. Or if you're at home, a safe journey to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. See you all on, a lot of you, on Monday at Morriston. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.